to get Sergeant Lane to read that email that he sent in an effort to dissuade him from taking the victim seriously. And so
I understand the impact and the importance of the tape. That's not the question. My issue, I guess, I needed to know how it came into the possession of the state. So now I've got the answer. It came into the state as part of that. I would imagine the search warrant was executed and his phone was taken and that was found on his phone.
That's right.
So what the court is faced with now is, does it now consider the self-serving hearsay, if you will, of the defendant on that tape, consider that as the opening of the door to bring out the history of this lawsuit and the animosity that came about as a result, allegedly?
I think it's cool.
I'll give you.
Sorry.
I'll give you a chance to.
I thought you were asking.
No, I'll give you a chance to respond. I was kind of looking at Mr. Lakin.
I think that Nancy gets that question more. Go back to my position early on that bias, the prejudicial part of this bias part is really important for the jury to know. The jury needs to know, and whether, as I said earlier on the case law part of this, whether it goes to the weight of the evidence, really what we're talking about. The jury can dismiss it as nothing, but it really means nothing. On the other end of the home, at least the jury knows that it's out there, potentially statements to be biased against somebody as a result of all that loss. But I think that now that there's evidence, no matter which way it came in, it's in. And they know about it. It's really their problems to decide whether they think weighing it, whether it means or doesn't mean. The fact that there's now evidence in the case is important.
Thank you, Ms. Frederick.
Yes, I think the question is the tentative order that you addressed before we started this trial, and the question is still, was Bybee treated differently than any other deputy when a private citizen called the sheriff's office and complained that he tried to kill her, that he took her money, et cetera, all the charges that are pending before us. And at this point, there has been no showing that Bybee was treated any differently than when serious allegations are made against him.
I guess that's the court has kept a very close eye on the evidence that has been adduced at trial so far, looking for the nexus between the lawsuit that was previously filed by Detective Bybee and the animus that is purportedly what the defense is seeking to introduce here. I still have yet to see that nexus. This case arose out of a citizen's complaint. The citizen's complaint was responded to by the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department initiated an internal affairs investigation, and then once the checks were found, initiated a criminal investigation. There has been no evidence adduced so far that anyone from the sheriff's department or working on behalf of the sheriff's department induced Ms. Soule to come forward and file a complaint against Detective or Officer Bybee. So I do not see the nexus, despite his own words about him feeling that downtown may have it out against him. Getting to the second point, which may open the door for this type of testimony, I have yet to hear anything in the form of facts or evidence that would indicate that Officer Bybee was treated differently than any other officer against whom a civilian had complained. And until I hear that evidence, or until I see the nexus developed, my earlier ruling stands. The issue of the lawsuit will not be subject to cross-examination at this time.
Just on the record, if I may.
You may.
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand the court's ruling, I respect it. The issue of whether it's ambiguous or how it was treated despite enforcement is really, in my view, not, to some degree, the cases talk about before, when, and others. It's in the key to those other cases, especially in Lombardi, is the pre-existing lawsuits. And even in Webb, pre-existing action, that's the part of the nexus that opens up the bias argument and the weight of the evidence. I understand you can respect the court's understanding of that. But that's my own concern, obviating or getting around the invidious component that somehow this is selective enforcement with respect to. I think the only issue really is because it's a bias suit like Lombardi. And Lombardi talks further on in the case about bias and whether or not that should be in front of the jury and all that. And that's only, I think that Sergeant Blake also mentioned that he wanted to be part of the law, so I may be paraphrasing. Something to that effect he said. I was trying to take good notes on that. But that's the only reason I see that as where it is.
And again, I appreciate your argument, Mr. Lakin, but the fact is, in both Webb and in both Lombardi, you can see a but-for. If you apply a but-for analysis, you can see the distinction between what's going on in this case and in those cases. But for the complaint in Webb, and I'm just refreshing my own memory, in Webb it was, let's see, the defendant was arrested for sale of controlled substance, and his claim was, they framed me because. So, but for his earlier complaint, they wouldn't have framed him. In Lombardi, it was...
I think it was a lawsuit in 73.
In Lombardi, it was a 1974 lawsuit, or 73 lawsuit that was settled in 74. And he testified that the arresting officer who stopped him for the alleged traffic offenses mentioned him, so I understand you like to complain about officers. There is a direct nexus, but for the fact that he filed the lawsuit, would the officer have stopped him and mentioned those words to him?
Right.
That but-for analysis, when applied to this case, does not match the facts and circumstances in those two cases.
Right.
And that's why the court's analysis at this point will stand.
Okay. Am I right that if in the event that some testimony is illicit that makes that...
I have yet to hear it, but my mind is open, and I continue to listen to the facts and evidence in this case, waiting for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other issues?
No.
Just one minor issue on the scheduling issue. I did leave a voice message Saturday from my office with the legal administrator who said that I could not talk to the nurses, and that I just told him that they need to be here Wednesday. If you have an issue, you can come to court and see me on Monday morning and see Judge Mason if you'd like. I wasn't condescending, but I was very firm with them that we're working here.
Mm-hmm.
You won't let me talk to these nurses, and they're coming in here on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock to sit down here. When I have a chance, I can talk to them.
Yep.
But he's obviating the right for me to talk to them on the phone, so I can at least tell them. Here's what I suspect, given the way you talk to my staff in the Tampa office, is that he might run some lawyer over here from the hospital today. He may have some connection about that call.
Well, we'll be happy to speak with him if that occurs.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's bring out the jury.
Yeah, John.
All right, Superintendent.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Welcome back.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that none of you have fled the country or anything. And do appreciate you coming back to this. I hope all of your respective teams won on Saturday and Sunday and had a good weekend. Once again, I have to ask you, did any of you fall prey to looking at news events or news reports about this trial at all?
No.
Very good. And anyone try to approach your influence in any way about this case? Once again, all negative responses. And lastly, did any of you do any independent research into the facts and circumstances surrounding this case?
No, sir.
Right, so all of you are once again sitting here with knowledge imparted on you from the testimony of witnesses and the evidence you've seen so far. That is it, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. All right, Ms. Fraley, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor,
Oh, I'm sorry, recall
Sergeant Legg.
Sergeant Legg for
Yes.
cross-examination.
Yes.
Thank you. He probably should be re-sworn after an entire weekend. Rob, just have him re-sworn, please.
Yes.
Your Honor, thank you.
Stand right here for me. Raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am. Welcome back, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, you may proceed.
No question, Jeff.
No questions?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Sergeant, you may step down.
Thank you.
Ms. Fraley, your next witness.
Judge, say we call Detective Jim Klay.
Clay, thank you.
Stand right here. Stand right here.
Yes, I did.
Morning, Judge. Good morning, sir.
Give me just a quick moment to get settled.
Oh, I made one, or I had one made for this weekend. Look at the thing I had made. Much wait to see that.
I'm a little more subtle.
I can see that.
Detective Clay, feel free to use either one of the pointers that are available to you today,
Thank
as
you,
opposed
Judge.
to the laser pointer.
May need a little help, thank you.
Thank you. May I inquire, Mr. Jackman?
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Detective. Can you please state your full name and spell your last name?
Detective James Clay, spelled K-L-A-Y.
And, sir, how are you employed?
I'm a detective with the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been employed by the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office?
Next month will be 23 years.
And of those 23 years, how long have you been a detective?
10 years, 2 months.
And, sir, what are your current duties?
I'm currently assigned to the intelligence unit in the digital forensics lab. We have a dedicated 3-person unit that just does forensics on digital devices.
Okay, and so what do you do as an investigator with the digital forensics lab?
The digital forensics lab, we're not the regular detectives that normally go out and talk to people. We only work our cases in the lab, so we're not carrying a caseload besides what comes in, just to clarify that. I am responsible for the any electronic evidence, whether that is a computer, a phone. I've taken down servers, modems, routers, gas pump skimmers, DVRs, and I've had extensive training for those. We just pretty much anything that could have data on electronically, that's what the 3 of us in our unit are responsible for.
Okay, so can you tell the members of the jury what training you have with regard to the analysis of digital evidence?
For digital evidence, I'll start off with a couple of the task force and things I'm associated with and how it led me to that training. I'm a member of the Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force in the Tampa Bay area. As being a member of that Secret Service Task Force, I get the privilege, at least, I think, to attend classes that the Secret Service sponsors. The Secret Service runs what we call the Cyber Academy. It's a national computer forensic institute in Hoover, Alabama. I was nominated and attended a 5-week school, basic computer evidence recovery technician. I had to go live in Alabama for 5 weeks and complete the class. It's a ground-up school for maybe somebody who doesn't know computers, which I knew in the first place, of everything from this is a computer and this is a power button to the full forensics of how to interpret what the ones and zeros in the data and everything means, including phones, computers.
Beyond the scope of the question.
I
Asked him about his training and experience. He's giving testimony as to training, specifically as to the Secret Service Cyber Academy. So, overruled.
Go ahead.
And within that training, at least to that particular 5-week school, it was also inclusive of vendor training for certain digital computer forensic programs that are industry standard ones, specifically Encase, Magnet IEF, and Celebrite, which will come up later in my testimony. Again, those are pretty much industry standard courses. I just also recently completed another 2-week class at the NCFI Hoover for Apple Mac forensics. Another one, I'd go live there for 2 weeks. It was not really a ground-up school, it's an advanced school of how to work with a Mac Apple file system and computers. They're, say, apples and oranges, so to speak, of Apple to Macintosh, or I'm sorry, Microsoft stuff. As part of my normal duties, one of my main things, the lion's share what I do, is child crimes and child pornography investigations. And a part of that, I'm a member of the Central Florida Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force as part of that training. I've attended numerous seminars, webinars, and training with ICAC of computer forensics, router forensics, phone forensics. I've attended a number of what's called the National White Collar Crime Center. They're a national teaching institution that the federal government, the Department of Justice sponsors, and part of those classes was from the DOJ, from NW3C, with all these acronyms I'm spitting out as.
What's ICAC?
ICAC, I'm sorry, Internet Crimes Against Children. The NW3C classes are taught around the country. That way that everyone in the country that attends these has the same curriculum, standards, training, testing. I have attended the basic data recovery and analysis course. That's how to actually capture data from electronic devices. I've attended and completed the intermediate data recovery and analysis class that they teach. That totals about a week and a half for those two classes. That's actually how to analyze the data, how to look at it. I've also, for NW3C, attended a week-long cell phone examination class, which included how to look at cell tower records, cell phone records, and so forth. Another class I've been to NCFI Hoover was through my association with some FBI work that I've done. The FBI sponsored me to go to the Cyber Academy in Hoover, Alabama for a week-long school called Basic Mobile Device Investigations. It's just what it sounds, how to look at mobile devices, whether that's a GoPro or a phone or a tablet. And that also included how to use some of the industry standards like Celebrite, which is what we use to look at phones. It covered cell tower data, technology, and information. In addition to my Windows and some other training that I've had, I've also had some other training I was fortunate to attend. There's another industry standard computer program called Blacklight. I'm a certified Blacklight examiner. That means I completed the class and the examination. It's a 3-day class, which actually took twice, because when I was at Hoover for the MAC class for 2 weeks, we did it all over again. But that basically says that you are certified to use their tool, that you know what you're doing, in other words. In addition to that, I've had a lot of training as a detective, Sorry.
Do you have additional experience as a detective in criminal investigations?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you just briefly tell the jury your experience as a detective in criminal investigations?
Before I came into this unit, which I've been doing digital forensics for just over 3 years, I was a detective for almost exactly 7 years, like 7 years in a week. Before I left that job as a detective, I ended up being the senior detective, meaning I had the longest staying power. I was a field training officer. I worked everything from robberies and burglaries to homicides, rape, robbery. I've had training extensively in the whole gamut of investigations. Even back then, I was on a Secret Service task force for white-collar crime investigation.
Okay, and in addition to experience as a detective, do you have other experience with the Sarasota Sheriff's Office?
Yes, I've pretty much worked everywhere in the department except running the boat. I started in the jail, went to the desk, went to patrol, went to traffic, was a detective, went back to traffic to ride the motorcycle. I've hung off the helicopter by a strap. I've ridden the motorcycle. I've ridden the horse. I've just done all kinds of crazy things. I've been fortunate with a big agency. We can do all kinds of stuff. My list of schools is like 2 pages long,
Okay, I'm not going to.
but it's just it's a lot of training and experience. The lion's share of my training experience had to do with being a detective, whether that was homicide investigations, advanced unresolved homicides. When I worked as a detective, I was on the child abduction response team, so I attend a lot of classes on child crimes and child abductions, and actually, unfortunately, worked a couple big child abduction murder cases.
Okay. Can you tell the members of the jury how you became involved in this case, first involved?
I was first asked to what we call dump some phones back on January 12th of this year, 2017. I was called in one evening to extract data from roughly about 10 phones that have been taken during a criminal investigation. And at that point, because it was supposedly involving an employee or employees' phones were being taken, is what most of those phones were. At that juncture, I wasn't looking at any data. It was dump this data, give it to the detective sergeant, the case agent, and you're done with it. It was a few weeks later that they came back and they asked me to actually start working a case.
Okay, so after the initial download of data from several phones, can you tell the members of the jury how the investigation then progressed?
The investigation then progressed is, in addition to seizing these phones, whether they belong to employees or witnesses or sheriff's office phones or their personal phones, is they had seized some evidence from an alleged victim. from Marcia Soul, I believe it was.
We'll just refer to her as Ms. Soul.
Okay.
Okay. So can you tell the members of the jury what types of devices you were given to analyze?
Well, those 3 devices that belonged to Ms. Soul were an Apple iPhone, an Apple all-in-one desktop. It's a type where there's not a separate computer unit. It's all inside the monitor. Everything's in there. And then an older iPad Model 2, okay. And those 3 devices.
So let's start with the iPhone. Can you tell the members of the jury what you did with Ms. Soul's iPhone?
When the device came into my lab, it was seized on the 12th. I believe we got on the 13th. We attempted to do intake on it, but it was locked via a PIN number. Okay,
and we're going to get to that. Was there initial take of Ms. Soul's?
Yes, and let me back up a little bit. The way our lab works is normally when we have a case, if I have like a child porn case, I got 30 items, they all go onto the server. When they're all done, then our technician that does a lot of the work for us, the background work of making those copies, gives them to us. In this case, it was kind of piecemeal. There had been a complaint about this case back in December. When that phone dump was done, it was kind of like the ones on January 12th. That phone dump was done and they said, you're not going to look at this, and we kept it on our server. So when this case comes in, the 12th and the 13th, we then went back and looked at this dump of Ms. Soul's phone from December 22nd.
Okay.
Kind of a roundabout way of going back to it.
So
excuse me.
There was an initial, when you say dump, it's a mirror image?
Sorry, it's a colloquial term we use. It's a mirror image. It's a logical copy of what we can actually get of an iPhone these days.
Okay. So, and when was that mirror image of her iPhone initially made?
December 22nd of 2016.
Okay. And did you actually make that mirror image copy of Ms. Soul's iPhone?
No, our forensic technician, Brooke Bazell, she makes all the copies, and especially in internal complaints. That way we're kind of shielded from it. We might know the deputy. She does the dump. She gives internal affairs. And then I keep saying wash our hands of it. Then we're not involved unless it progresses to a criminal case.
Okay. So can you tell the members of the jury how you actually make a copy of an electronic device?
How we make a copy of an electronic device, there's a couple different tools that we use. One of the ones we refer to most is Celebrite. Celebrite, you see it on the news. It's a company that's well-renowned. It's the industry standard, so to speak, besides their competitors would want to hear that. But what the Celebrite does is you actually attach the phone through the program to your forensic computer, or there's a standalone Celebrite kiosk type device. In this case with iPhones, you usually have to attach it to your computer. The way that iPhone security is set up, there's certain data sets that will or won't let you get. So that's why we call it a logical instead of a physical. You get an exact copy of all the databases, all the pictures, all the videos, without getting into the minor, finite parts. There's certain things you can't get anymore off an iPhone. But again, it makes that complete copy A to Z of all their files and folders and structures, okay, to a degree.
So what did you then do with the copy data from Ms. Soul's cell phone?
Well, the first thing I did is I actually validated that the information was for that phone. When we take a phone in, we document the serial numbers, we take pictures of it. Within the phone dump, because the phone has that data programmed in the chip, when we go over the data, we actually look at it and say, yeah, I'm looking at the right phone. This is the right serial number. This is the phone number. It has maybe the user's name. And so obviously you wouldn't want to have the wrong phone. It says this phone belongs to, and that process was done. And then I actually began the task of, say, analyzing or parsing the data myself. The program does it for you. It puts everything in nice little tabs. You just hit your pictures button. But there's more to that when it comes to text messages, phone calls. We actually look at the databases themselves that the phones use, specifically in this case Apple, to see, yes, if there shows there's a phone call and there's a text message, I pull that database out and I actually manually go through it and validate it.
Okay. After you validated, at some point did you separate communications between Ms. Soul and the defendant?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell members of the jury what you did?
Of course, to validate, to make sure I had everything there, I looked at the totality of everything, how many phone calls in total, if there's, sometimes user interaction can be attributed by who does what, or how much is deleted, or if they're a normal deleter. In this case, there wasn't not a lot of deleted content, meaning there were a lot of phone calls, there were a lot of text messages, but I actually sorted the data. I went through the contacts to see, I actually keyword searched Frank and then Bybee or Frankie Bybee to see if the defendant was actually contacting her phone, which he was. His name and his known phone number were both listed in their device contacts.
Okay. And what did you then do initially with that data that you extracted?
I actually went through the data. During the investigation, there was some direction. It was driven by the detectives because I don't know the case. I need you to look for these certain dates or certain things. So, of course, initially I look for iChats, conversations, phone calls, supply that in bulk to the case agent until they then later come back and say, oh, now I need you to drill down on this date and time. So I supplied text messages or iChats.
Okay. As an investigator with the forensic unit, do you even interview any witnesses?
Rarely ever.
Now, when Ms. Soul's phone was provided to the digital forensic unit, initially, was there a passcode associated with the phone?
No, it was completely unlocked. It was not only did I review the data, but actually spoke to our technician to confirm what she put on her report supplied to me about that data. And then within the phone data itself, if there is a passcode, it will report within the Cellebrite report. So no, there was no passcode at the time.
So on 12/22, there's no passcode on her phone?
No.
Okay. Now, do you generate a property receipt with respect to the phone initially?
No, in an internal affairs investigation, usually there's a non-criminal complaint. I don't normally have a lot of contact with people in cases, but in internal affairs complaints, I sometimes do. I mean, I recently went down to the mall to meet with a lady, and I dumped her phone in a complaint. But
and there's no property receipt?
And there's no property receipt. I'm actually taking the phone as evidence. In this case, as I recall, I remember the phone came in, the data was extracted, and it was given back to Miss Soul by Sergeant Riley.
Okay, so the fact that no property receipt in an internal affairs investigation, is that normal?
Well, yes, if it hasn't broached the point where it's a criminal case, well, there's no point of documenting as evidence. It's not evidence.
Okay. So was the phone, after the mirror image of the contents, returned back to Ms. Soul?
Yes, we of course don't touch the phone, don't delete anything. We made our copy and we just hand it back to her.
Okay. Was there a subsequent time in which Ms. Soul's phone was examined again by the sheriff's office?
That would be January 13th after it was seized on the 12th.
Okay. At that time, was there an attempt to download a copy of the forensic data on Ms. Soul's phone at this time?
Yes, there was.
Were you successful in downloading the data from Ms. Soul's phone at this time?
No.
Why?
It was locked via PID number that we couldn't get around.
Okay. Does the sheriff's office have the capability to unlock an iPhone that is password protected?
No, we have not been able to get into any iPhones past the 4 model. When this phone was examined on the 22nd of December, it was running iOS 10.01 or 2. Anything past 10 anyway is a whole even other issue, but there's no way, because the way iOS 10 is set up is by default, and there's no way to know till you do it. It doesn't say, hey, you got 2 more tries. If you enter 10 incorrect tries, the phone will completely erase itself. It's completely unrecoverable. So you can't sit there and try and punch in the common numbers that someone could use.
Okay, so that goes to my next question. So what happens if you randomly insert numbers into the PIN code?
You could erase the phone and destroy evidence. So it's obviously something you just wouldn't do.
So when is the last data that you're able to examine on Ms. Soul's iPhone?
December 22nd.
So essentially, there's no way to then get into this phone without the PIN code?
Not any way that the sheriff's office currently could do or perform. We just don't have the ability.
Okay. So there was a PIN code added between December 22nd and January 13th?
Correct.
Can you determine the date that that PIN code was added?
No, not without actually getting into the phone.
Okay. Was Ms. Soul able to provide a PIN code to now the iPhone?
No.
Did Ms. Soul have other devices or accounts that had PIN codes?
Yes, she did. During the investigation, obviously looking at her iMac and her iPad, there was also later a Google Chrome netbook that she didn't possess anymore. Another person did. We'll get into that later. That had been hers. And there was a commonality of a PIN of 2210. That was specifically what unlocked the Google Chrome netbook that another witness had. But going through accounts, if it was, say, whatever it might be, your email, it might have been Marcia2210 or Soul2210, or it was that commonality. And yes, I did try that one attempt at 2210 to unlock it.
Were you successful
No.
with that common PIN code?
No.
No. Detective Clay, now let's go through the data that you were able to extract from Ms. Soul's iPhone with a serial number ending in FF9Y.
Okay.
Were you able to extract the data?
Well, I was able to examine the data from the December 22nd extraction, yes.
Okay. And what tool did you use to extract the data?
Celebrate Physical Analyzer was used, and I then secondarily used another program called Magnet IEF to validate it, to make sure that if one pulls out a certain phone calls and the other one does, if you understand, just to make sure that, you know, besides the manual stuff, so mostly it was Celebrate Physical Analyzer.
Okay. Why did you use the Celebrate Physical Analyzer?
They're one of the cutting edge leading companies in the world for cell phone extraction analysis. They are who they are. They're the ones that got in the San Bernardino shooter's phone. They're world renowned. They are the place you go to get into phones.
Okay. So you briefly mentioned it earlier. Was there a review of Ms. Soul's contact list?
Yes.
And was the defendant listed as a known contact?
Yes, he was in his known phone number. I think it's 238-8564 is his known personal phone number.
Besides examining her contact data, what else did you examine?
I examined it for iChat specifically on certain dates to see what conversations took place, what was sent back and forth.
Did you attempt to examine all communications between Ms. Soul and the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. I think you mentioned iChats. What are iChats?
iChats specifically are communications between two iPhones. And if people do or don't know about iPhones, when you look at it, it depends on the content, how much data is sent, whether it's an SMS message or MMS, or just to make it simple, a lot of times it's the color. If you look at the color, you might have somebody with an Android phone who comes back that their conversation's in green, but it's specifically iPhone to iPhone. And part of what that whole capability of iPhones is, it's not that they're sending data through that. Like in the old days, text messages would go through your cell phone company and they could tell what you're sending. These are fully encrypted, so no one can intercept it in the middle. So it kind of goes through Apple servers at some point, but just to dumb it down, it's just between iPhones for that security of encryption.
Okay, so did the defendant have an iPhone?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so what did your forensic examination of the iChats between the two devices belonging to Ms. Soul and the defendant reveal?
There were a lot of conversations over a period of time. The period I investigated was from October 21st of 2016, when the defendant first had contact with Ms. Soul, through the date of his arrest in January. But I was concentrating on one certain conversation thread. And when I say that is, the way these phones work is they put everything in a database, and the database has a relationship number for each thread and conversation. So if you delete the conversation, it may not be in the whole thread to associate back, but they're still in there and they're just kind of scrambled around. But if it's an undeleted thread, because that whole header is there, you know that every one of those conversations fall within it. So when you pull up your phone and you pull it up and there's, you know, I look for Art Jackman, and any conversation with him will be associated, and the phone puts it where you can visually see it. So again, if it's deleted, they're scattered everywhere. It might not even say who it's to or from, but really, again, just concentrated on one certain long conversation.
Okay.
You may.
And two documents as to be read.
Okay. Yes, I do.
Okay. What are, I handed you two documents, States Exhibit 56 and States Exhibit 56A.
Okay.
What are States Exhibit 56 and 56A?
What they are for A and B is the whole conversation thread of 435 messages that existed on the system are the main one, and the smaller one, the main one is 56, and 56A is 3 pages of iChats specifically just for December 10th of 2016, which would be encompassed in here, obviously, but just to bring this out, it's kind of hard to read these and go through it. It's a little fine print. But this is directly from the phone's databases as interpreted by Celebrate Physical Analyzer.
Are those accurate extractions of the iChats between the Soul's iPhone and the defendant's phone?
Yes, and it not only identifies the defendant by his first name of Frank, but his phone number. The way that the device works is when you use your iChat, your messages, it associates it back with that contact number. And part of the validation process is, again, not just using other programs, but manually going through and pulling out that database and interpreting it myself. Make sure the dates are right, make sure the actual conversations are there, yes.
Your Honor, this time says we move that 56 and 56A.
No objection having been heard. 56 and 56A are admitted. You may publish at your convenience.
I'm just going to publish 56A, but 56 are all the iChats.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With respect to State Exhibit 56A, and I'll let you use your laser pointer with you.
I'll try and use this.
Okay.
Who's the
There should be a.
Or, who's the pointer?
Go ahead. You can point to it.
Okay. I'll use something. I can see this.
Yeah.
I'm good right
All
now.
What did you find with respect to investigative significance with respect to the iChats on December 10th?
There was some conversation going back and forth. I'll interject in my opinion. Obviously, the jury can see what was talked about. I will take care of it. Frank, how you feeling today? And they're talking back and forth. He tells her she's sweet and kind, just normal run-of-the-mill. How you doing? How's your day? What's going on? Any kind of stuff. But then it takes, I would say, whatever tack at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't want you running my life, Frank. I have to deal with it. And then we can see what's said there unless you want me to read them off.
And when do the iChats on this phone, the Soul's phone, end on December 10th?
It's actually on the last and third page at 10:32 a.m. There's a notation that there was a message sent, but the content doesn't exist on the phone anymore. It actually stops right there on the 10th and doesn't resume again until the 11th. And the reason why that's even in there is because the way the phone works with the databases is it doesn't just rely on your database of your messages. The iPhone uses a file called recents log, which is a word they made up, recents. And what this does is the recents is everything you've done in that phone. It will list chronologically. If you get an email, then you get a text, you get a phone call, so it can fix itself if there's an error. And this actually was pulled from, it was deleted out of the messages, so it was blank in the messages, and the recents showed it exists, but it didn't have any other data. This is all I can show anyone that exists on the phone at this point.
Okay. So there's an indication something's deleted off the phone at 10:32?
Correct. Whatever happened at 10:32 or on till the 11th, there's no doubt on the phone. It's deleted. I can't tell you exactly when it's deleted. The iPhone doesn't let you see exactly when something's deleted. I can just say for a fact that there was some sort of message between the two, and it was deleted.
So the content of those messages, and we'll get into your examination of other devices, but with respect to the Soul's phone, any communications between Ms. Soul's device, there's an indication that that content was deleted.
The content existed at one point, and at some juncture it's been removed. But again, there's other things on the iPhone where they track usage, like the recent logs. So I know for sure there was some sort of message between the two. That's all I could tell you.
We'll be able to get into your analysis through other devices.
Yes.
But right now, just looking at the phone, and this is from the data that you were extracted from the phone that was turned over from by Ms. Soul on that you received on 12.
Correct.
Detective, if someone deletes part of an iChat conversation, what happens to the data?
Like any other computer system or filing system, it doesn't actually immediately always remove the data. It just marks that area can be overwritten. So if you delete a picture, it doesn't always delete the picture. It just says, hey, this spot on the hard drive, or in this case the chip, can be used. Well, with cell phones, it's actually in a giant database. It's literally, if you've seen an Excel spreadsheet, they're in lines. It just marks in the system that line is available. So if it needs it, it might delete it, it might not. So sometimes we can recover data. There's no rhyme or reason. It just depends on how heavily used the device is. But in this case, the entry had been completely written over, at least again, that it existed was still there.
Okay. That it existed, meaning it was deleted, was still there, but the content was missing.
Correct. There's no message at all. At least at this juncture, there's no data sent. I mean, it could have been a blank message, but...
And we'll discuss that later on with your other analysis. You indicated that you spoke about an iPad 2 belonging to Ms. Soul. Was it examined?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Can you tell the members of the jury your results of your examination of Ms. Soul's iPad?
It was pretty much without any result for the investigation, either positive or negatively. It wasn't used too heavily during the investigation, and it wasn't really synced. Apple uses handoff. You can, if you want, have all your text messages, calls, internet sync between your device. So when you hand off from your iPhone to your iPad to your iMac, all that data will be on them. I did not see that. I didn't see that on her phone either. So she wasn't, or at least the user of the phone wasn't using this handoff thing. So we were able to get, again, some of the PIN codes, but again, it wasn't used, and it also established the fact that there wasn't that intermingling of the handoff.
Okay, when you say intermingling of the handoff, again, it was not synced to receive all the other data off the phone?
Correct.
Were there any other devices belonging to Ms. Soul that you forensically examined?
Yes, the last thing of hers was the all-in-one Apple iMac at Sheriff's Office evidence number 30, as I recall. It's a good-sized computer.
Okay. And can you tell the members of the jury your forensic analysis that was completed with respect to this iMac computer?
A number of forensic programs were used to analyze this computer, to validate them. One of the main ones that was used was Blacklight. I'm a certified Blacklight examiner. They gear themselves as a company investigations towards Apple iOS devices because they literally are so different from a Windows machine of how they work and what they do and what they keep. That way I could look at the totality of the use, what internet's being used, meaning what browser and how much email, whether there's deletion, whether someone's a deleter or not, to pretty much get an idea of who or what, and then finitely driven during the investigation look at certain dates and times.
Okay. Did your investigation then focus on communications between Ms. Soul and the defendant? Yes.
Luckily, out of these computer forensic programs allow you to word search. It takes a long time for the program to process the data, but the way it does is it literally goes through and it catalogs every single word that's in the entire computer, and you can search for, in this case, I searched for Frank. I want to see if there's anything, whether they're an email or whether it was anything, or looked up some guy named Frank. Couldn't even be another person. But specifically, that's one of the first things I did is I keyword search Frank.
Okay. And as a result of the keyword Frank that you did search on Ms. Soul's iMac, did you discover a communication, specifically that you were looking for?
Yes, I did. I found an email that was dated December 22nd that showed it was sent from Marcia Soul to Philomena Pereira, another witness that we'll discuss. That's who I took the Google Netbook from. And it was titled, "Give to Frank but Do Not Read." And again, it was dated December 22 of 2016, like 1:30 in the morning.
Okay, and I just want to go back to the data. You actually recovered Ms. Soul's iMac or received it later on in January.
Yes, that was one of the things that was taken from her home on January 12th of 2017.
And
We took her phone, her iMac, and her iPad all at once.
And you were able to access the iMac with date range after 12/21 because you received it.
Yes, we made a forensic image of the hard drive like we do. We don't actually like go into the computer. We make a forensic image, a bit-for-bit copy, A to Z, and that's actually preserved. That way you don't contaminate the evidence, but it allows us to access the data exactly as it existed or the user would see, including all the email. And again, this email was one of 5,958 emails that were on the system. It was a lot.
Detective, you indicated that you discovered an email on the iMac.
Yes.
Showing projected overview, states exhibit 16A. Is that the email that you had discovered on Ms. Soul's iMac?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you find it on the iMac?
It was actually in the trashes, whereas Windows calls stuff that's thrown away in the recycle bin. Apple Mac uses trashes, and it doesn't commingle it like a Windows machine. You'll have a specific trashes folder for each thing. In this case, it was under the V4, the version 4 mail that Apple uses, trashes. So it was only mail that was in the trash, and there were 400. It was only email that was in that trash or trashes, and there were 419 emails that were in the trash.
Okay. Now let's just be clear. The fact that it's on the iMac doesn't mean that device sent it or that information that you found in the trash.
No.
Why do you say that?
This was specifically using AOL Mail and using the actual computer's email function. You can get apps. You could go to the web and get your email. And I have AOL. I've been using it for 25 years. But this used the innate normal Apple one. So what that means is it's going to update, it's going to sync. And I know that based on my training experience, personally, professionally, with this case, is that if one were to use AOL and I pull it up on my phone and I read it, when I go to my desktop, it syncs it, whether it's read or it's in the trash. So if I throw it away on my phone, it syncs and it throws it away on your desktop. And the reason why is I erase emails all the time that I need to go back and find, and I may find it on my computer, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was done on that computer. Again, it could be synced just for the email from AOL.
Okay, so that's the AOL sync email off that device.
That's what it could be, yes.
Okay. Now, again, where did you find it off that device, the iMac, this email?
It was one of the 419 emails that was put in the trash.
Okay. So going now back to Ms. Soul's AOL account, could someone remotely delete that email from her AOL account and have it go into the trash on her iMac?
Yes, again, I do that all the time. I go and I log on my computer and I pull up my deleted emails from whatever, my motorcycle club or personally, and go back and look at them and go, I didn't mean to delete it, and I can look at it on other devices, the way it cross-syncs.
Okay. So from another location, an email from the AOL account can be deleted, then go into the trash on that iMac.
Yes.
Okay, and
It's
what
possible.
would you just need to do to send that email through AOL and delete it?
you could log in anywhere, whether it's your phone, whether your home computer, your tablet, wherever, as long as you have the credentials to access that account. You could do this with Google Mail. I could do this. I have Gmail. I've done the same thing. It syncs that way I can get to my data, or one could get to their data from any other device for whatever reason.
Is that anywhere in the world that can do that?
Anywhere in the world.
You said it was deleted and found in the trash. What was the date of the deletion from the AOL account?
That one was deleted on the 22nd. I believe it was about 4:30 in the morning. Of the 419, they were all deleted between the 21st and the 22nd. I don't remember the date range the actual emails were sent, but the deletion range was, there's this mass deletion, as I call it, not exaggerating, 419 emails in 2 days.
Okay, so there were 419 thereabouts emails deleted from Ms. Soul's AOL account?
Correct.
And again, how did you find this email? What search did you use to discover this email?
I searched for Frank, and luckily it's not anything that's encrypted. It's out in the open. It's in plain English that the computer is able to index, as we say, and it just found Frank and
okay,
just popped right up.
approximately how many emails did you look at?
It was roughly 5,958. That was my final tally.
Did you notice anything different with respect to State's Exhibit 16A?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell them to the jury, and you can point to it on the diagram or the projection behind you,
Okay.
the difference that you noted with respect to this email?
The signature caught my eye, and looking at those almost 6,000 emails between the existing ones and the deleted, I looked at emails that were addressed on her phone, and I looked at emails on her iPad, because I physically had these devices, at least the iPad, to look at and dump. This was the only email that had both her nice quote she uses on her AOL and sent from your iPhone. They really don't intermingle. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, can you show the members of the jury what you're referring to?
What I mean is, there's a quote here from Anne Frank, and all of her AOL mail had that. And if it was sent from her phone, it only said sent from my iPhone. And based on training experience personally, and then trying to validate this ourselves, meaning myself and Detective Whedon in our lab, we found out that even when we made fake accounts and did this ourselves from our iPhones or from our laptops, they didn't commingle. Your phone either says from my iPhone, or if you're on your desktop computer, it says that only. It doesn't do both. It was the only one of all the 5,958 emails that had both.
Okay, and you're talking about the quote from the diary of Anne Frank,
And sent from my iPhone.
and no other email in the almost 6,000 that you reviewed had both of those.
No, and I'm meticulous. This took weeks, months, whatever, going through, paging through every email.
Besides the email States Exhibit 16A, did you find any other pertinent information on the computer?
I went through and looked for certain internet use. Again, being driven by the detectives, and in general, of course, I'm looking for anything mentioning Frank, of course. But then during the investigation, detectives would tell me, I need you to look for internet use between this date and this date, or look for certain things specifically, because internet use in this case, there was a lot of it. You can't just go, here's all their internet use. I mean, the Apple Safari had 427,000 different internet history items. So again, we finitely narrowed down to a certain date range in December that I was asked to look at.
Okay.
And then again in January, sorry.
Detective, I'm going to show you three documents. States Exhibit 57A and B, and State's Exhibit 58.
Okay.
Do you recognize State's Exhibit 57A and B and State's Exhibit 58?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what are State's Exhibit 57A and B and State's Exhibit 58?
These are visual representations of various amounts of data from Marcia Soul's iMac. In almost all these cases, it's not really interpreted by me. It's literally copied and pasted from her computer's data, so to speak, from the databases or the data to show graphically in these pretty little charts what occurred or what was done on the computer.
Okay. Can you describe what's in State's Exhibit 57A and B and 58?
Okay.
And say the exhibit number when you
All
describe
right, 57A is December 8th, 2016 web history from Marcia Soul's iMac. And then moving on to 57B is the same thing. It's web history for Marcia Soul's iMac for December 9th, 2016. And 58 is another history we'll get to, and somebody tell what that is too.
Yeah.
That is 58 is Marcia Soul's Apple computer PayPal history, specifically via Google Chrome. There were a number of different browsers that were used, and they're pulled out of different databases, but specifically just using Google Chrome.
Okay. And we're going to be discussing some PayPal records later on.
Okay.
But at this time, Judge, the statement was there in State's Exhibit 57A and B and State's Exhibit 58.
No objection having been heard. 57A and B, as well as 58 are admitted and may be published. Your
Inspector, did you find anything of investigative significance in your review of the web history on Ms. Soul's computer? Start with 8th
Okay.
of December. Can you tell members of the jury what they're actually seeing?
There were 3 different web browsers that we used throughout time on the computer. One's a normal Apple Safari, the one that comes as a standard installation when you use Apple Mac. Firefox and Google would be added on later after the fact, and actually Google's really hard to add onto a Mac computer. But that's what that represents of actual use between these different browsers. Maybe not showing who actually did it, but what was done on the computer, what was accessed in certain dates and times driven by the investigation.
And that was the 8th. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit, which was 57A, 57B.
And you can see that Career Builder was accessed via Apple Safari, and I believe that was due to an email. It was following a link from an email, and then someone used Firefox separately, was on Craigslist, payment confirmation. That's what that Craigs.com is on December 9th at 12:08 p.m. And then someone was using the Google Chrome internet browser on the 9th and accessed the AOL mail and then a Google account, and then later there was some other Google stuff that was entered on the 9th.
Okay, but the Firefox internet browser shows that there was a visit to Craigslist.
Craigslist payment confirmation, yes.
I'll show you page 2 of that document.
This is, it starts off at the top, bleeding over from the other page, that someone went to Morton's Gourmet Market, tried to make that one word. And then right after that, actually within seconds, that was at 10:08 a.m., at 10:32 a.m., that someone went and actually created a Google Chrome account, and then the victim's information, Marcia Soul's information was put in there. And that's part of creating a Google account for the first time, is you would put, these are called autofills. That way, when you start to type your name, if we put J.A., it finishes James Klay, and you don't have to put it in. But that's from the inception of that Google account.
So there's a Google Chrome account created on the 9th of December,
Yes.
providing Ms. Soul's information.
Yes.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 58. And what can you tell the jury with respect to all of that?
Try to get it all fit.
I can move it if you need. can you explain to the members of the jury what's in 58?
This is, as it states on the top, this is access via Google Chrome just to PayPal. This isn't all of the access on these dates per se. Could be more, could be less, but this is specifically just looking at PayPal. We can word search for PayPal for December 11th and 12th and 13th, and there's some more data on here. But again, it shows these certain things being done, whether it's logging in, whether it's authenticating. You have your challenges for security, where it could ask you for your mother's maiden name or whatever it might be, third-party authentication. It might want to send you a text or something. But that's what these accesses are, or attempted accesses on her home computer.
Okay, so again, Ms. Souls' Apple-based computer, my word, for all-in-one computer.
Yes.
And those are accesses to the PayPal website from her computer.
Correct, via Google Chrome.
Okay, and there was a Google Chrome on 57D account created on the 9th as well.
Correct, that was 2 days before the access to the PayPal that someone created that account for the first time.
Just going back to Exhibit 58, are all these separate web pages that are visited in the PayPal account via Google Chrome?
Pretty much they are. It also could be that they were reloaded. You'll see some of the same. They're called GUIDs, Global Unique Identifiers, that these long things are, so they can identify it. But based on the times, it could be where you go back and forth through a page,
Okay, so
reload, go to a new page.
on the, I'll just pick out a block, the third white box on the left-hand side,
Okay?
where it says client instance, and it says challenges email. What is being asked in that?
Because you're accessing the account, it wants to verify that you have access or privileges. You should be there. It's going to email you to make sure, yes, I'm wanting to log, or I am the one logging on, or I'm authorizing this log on via my email. That's that third-party authentication, excuse me.
Was there a significant internet history historically of Apple Safari?
Yes, I looked at the overall use of the browsers to maybe attribute who the user was, because people have preferences of what they like to use. In total, and I have it in my head, but I'll refer to my notes, Apple Safari was used 427,092 times between June 15, 2016 and January 12, 2017. Obviously, that's a lot, and that's the bulk of it. Secondly, following that would be Mozilla Firefox Internet Web Browser. There were 30,261 web URLs between 2013 and December 22nd of 16. And then lastly was Google, which was pretty new. The Google Chrome browser was used only 1,089 times, and that was only from October 14th of 2016, and the thing terminated January 12th of 2017. So it's just a little bit.
You said Google Chrome was created, I believe it was, the 9th on 57.
The actual Google Chrome account within it, because you can use Google Chrome, but you don't have to have a Chrome account. That wasn't done until December 9th.
Okay. Does the user determine the search browser?
Yes.
How?
Well, it can be done as a default. If the default on an Apple is going to be Safari, so if I follow from my email or how you set it up, just like in your computer, if you want to open up your videos with a certain program, you can go set it up that way, but by default, it's going to go to that Apple Safari, whereas for someone to use Google Chrome or Firefox, they've actually got to go to the icon and click on it and do the manual searchings, if you will.
We're going to change now the focus to AOL records.
Okay.
Detective, can you tell the members of the jury what the next step in your investigation was?
During the investigation, obviously, in finding the email and wondering the nexus of it, where it came from, who it came from, how it came to be, I issued a subpoena and then followed up with actually a number of subpoenas to AOL to find out exactly during that time range of that December 22nd email what internet protocol, what IP addresses were used to access Marcia Soul's account. And then again, as I said, it expanded from just the December date to the entire day of the investigation of October 21st through January 23rd of 2017. I mean, they only had information from, I think it was November 8th on, but again, that covers the email in question and other things. And so I asked them for account information for Marcia Soul, and again, any IP addresses that had ever logged onto her account or email.
Okay. Did you also subpoena IP addresses for the defendant's residence
I had
and devices associated with the defendant?
I had subpoenas flying. I subpoenaed the defendant's Verizon wireless IPs based on certain dates and usage, the defendant's home frontier internet to get the IP, and actually there were some IPs throughout time. It changed a little bit at the end of the investigation period. So again, to find out what his own IP was, I subpoenaed Marcia Soul's Comcast account to find out what her IP is, because your home IP normally doesn't change. Your cell phone IP will change every day or every hour, or just based ad hoc per use. So it was just a sea of paperwork of getting all these IPs. So Frontier and Verizon, many Verizon ones from the defendant's use, and then separately to call out what would be the victim, whether it's her Sprint or her Comcast.
Okay. So to be clear, you got the Ms. Soul's IP addresses as well as the defendant's IP addresses.
Yes.
During a date range.
During a date range, the investigation period was October 21st of 2016 through January 23rd. But again, all they had data on was, I believe it was November 8th of 2016 through January 18th. It was quite voluminous, as you can see.
Your Honor, I just need a few more minutes. I've never seen these documents, so I need to make some notes. I don't want to hold everybody up for that.
Right. Take a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been at it for a good hour now. Why don't we take a quick break? I'll give Mr. Capiers the opportunity to take a look at it. Why don't we just take a 10-minute break?
All right, first leader.
Be seated. Take a very short recess and then get to the facility. All set, gentlemen?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Just call the jury back.
All right, jurors entering.
Please consider seated, everyone. You may resume. Mr. Chairman.
Detective Clay, we were discussing Ms. Soul's AOL records.
Okay.
I'm going to show you 3 exhibits. Say Exhibit 59A, B, and C.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you recognize those exhibits? Say Exhibit 59A, B, and C.
Yes.
Okay. And where did you obtain, say, Exhibit 59A and B? And what are they?
59A and B is directly from AOL via subpoena. I obtained her account information. Marcia Soul's account information throughout time, her history of any screen names that she has had for her access, and then all of the internet protocol, the IP addresses, which I think the jury's already heard what IP is. I don't need to explain it to them.
But IP addresses are 59B?
Or 59B. This, I believe, when you printed it out, it was 411 pages. I went through this all manually, line by line.
Okay. So 59B are the IP accesses to Ms. Soul's account?
Yes.
For a specific date range?
Correct.
Okay. And what is 59C?
59C is just a summary that I typed up to put it together and my thoughts of
what IPs accessed her account and when. Throughout time, there were some we call static ones, like from Frontier, which pretty much would stay the same, whereas Verizon Wireless, again, it's ad hoc. I turn on my phone, I get a new IP usually every day, every 6 hours, whatever it is. So I had to go through this line by line, verify who they are, and working the investigations I do, I can look at them. I know if it starts at 47, it's Frontier. If it's 73, it's Comcast. If it's 174, it's Verizon. But of course, I verified that through the U.S. government, and then I subpoenaed the individual entities to correlate them.
Your Honor, this time the state would move into, and states exhibit what, 59C, I don't know, we discussed. 59C is your summary of your findings?
That's my summary of this.
Okay.
In addition to subpoenas where I'd gone to Frontier and I'd gotten the defendant's home router IP addresses.
Okay. Your Honor, this time the state would move into evidence states exhibit 59A and C.
As long as C is a demonstrative exhibit only, that's fine, and no objection.
All right.
Very good. 59A and B are admitted as evidence. 59C will be used for demonstrative purposes.
Detective, on the overhead, it states exhibit 59A. And again, what is 59A?
These are all the screen names that are associated with Marcia Soul, including iProblem Dog. I should probably use that one. But whatever account numbers, because back in the day, I know people even say that you used to have to pay for AOL or there were paid services. You'd give them your credit card. But this is her account information, I believe, from 2005 till we submitted this to them in January of 2017.
Okay. So you can verify that
This was actually her account, yes.
Okay, we're not going to pay for recess, so the jury can review the 411 days, okay?
Okay, it was a lot.
So, but states exhibit 59D is the IP address that's associated with the AOL access from the Souls account.
Correct, from 11/8 of 16 till January 18th of 17.
Okay. Now, 59C. Can you tell the members of the jury what 59C is?
It's where for demonstrative purpose, I put together everything on there that was there, and maybe I'm spelling the wrong day, maybe it's 1126, but regardless, the 411 pages were 12,910 total entries of IP addresses that had accessed the account.
Okay. So, just if you look at it, that's in this
Yes.
source document.
Yes, I had to go through every single one.
Okay.
And then I summarized what the bottom three paragraphs are, is that there's a total of 10,263 IP addresses that are attributed to the defendant accessing her account. Some of those I'll explain in a moment were through Sarasota County governments, Verizon Wireless, but as demonstrated there, there's some that specifically, as I'll point out, I'll actually go through it. The IP address 7264.221.229 is actually a static IP address, unlike what I was explaining about how cell phones work. Because we're the government, we keep the same IP, that if you look up our IP, we always own that IP. That is Sarasota County government. So someone with Sarasota County government, wasn't me, accessed her AOL account from November 29th of 16 till December 5th of 16 a number of times. It was actually 1,038 times. We moved down to the next paragraph.
Let me just stop you before. Let's go back to the second bullet on your summary.
Okay.
What is that second bullet on your summary?
That second bullet is the total amount of times I'm attributing to the defendant, including the 1,038 from Sarasota County government, because I know for a fact that no one from Sarasota County government that I know during investigation went to her AOL account, and that predated the investigation anyway of December 5th. So if you add in Sarasota County government, the Frontier addresses associated with the defendant's home router, and then the multiple IP address associated with the defendant's Verizon Wireless account, his personal phone, that was 4,008 times. It equaled the 10,263 times that IPs again accessed.
IP addresses associated with the defendant accessed Ms. Soul's AOL account over 10,000 times.
Objections. Someone.
Sustained.
Okay. How many times was the defendant's or Ms. Soul's AOL account accessed by a IP address associated with the defendant?
Specifically with his cell phone, it was 4,008 times. With his home router, well, it's actually in his wife's name to be specific. It's in Bybee's name, but it's the service address is his home residence. 5,217 times between November 29, 2016 and January 12, 2017. And yes, I did have to go in there and
Manually count.
go through every one of them and get them, and I double, triple checked and went through. I mean, this was meticulous. This took days and hours, and subpoenas flying because every time there's a new date, he gets the defendant's cell phone is issued a new IP address, and I've got to subpoena that address to the time and date and the actual second, not even the date. I have to say, Verizon, tell me at 11/29/2016 at 23:01 hours, who had this IP?
Now, let's go back to that over 10,000 times. What does that mean? Is it a page visit, or how is it calculated that there's a visit to that AOL account?
It can be a log on, but it meaning AOL, they specifically track every time an individual item or piece of email is accessed. And that could be reading it, going back to it, reading it, going back to it. It's not reading AOL News.
Okay.
When I went through this data, it was specifically almost all for access to mail.
To AOL
Email,
email.
yes.
And every time that you either view
Or interact
or
with it.
interact with an specific email is counted as a separate occasion.
Correct.
So you're not saying that it was 10,000 separate occasions that that email was associated, but during one time, someone can go into an email account, view multiple emails, and each of those views is counted as a separate event.
Correct. You could look at the same email 10 times. You'd have 10 separate entries. Doesn't mean that there was that compounding
but you have
amount.
to move back and forth for it to be counted twice.
Yes.
Detective, I'm going to refer you to State's Exhibit 16A, which you had discussed earlier in your testimony. An email from the Soul's AOL account, were you able to verify at that date and time an IP address associated with the defendant was accessing the Soul's AOL account?
Yes, for this one on November 22 and also on November 28th. I'm sorry, December 22nd. And I keep doing that, saying November.
There's two other exhibits. 16B to Ms. Gombra. Were you able to verify that an email or an IP address associated with the defendant was in the Soul's AOL account?
Yes, it was actually defendant's Frontier home internet IP address.
And same with State's Exhibit 16C, I don't know myself.
Yes, correct. That was also associated with the defendant.
Detective, I'm going to ask you now to change gears, and we're going to discuss some PayPal records.
Okay.
Were you asked to look into any other online accounts belonging to Ms. Soul?
Yes, I was specifically asked to look into PayPal use, which I looked in the devices, and then actually issued a subpoena through the state attorney's office to PayPal for Ms. Soul's account information and IP accesses. I didn't ask them for actual transactional data, like what was purchased, just to be clear, just what was used to access it and whose account it was.
Okay. What is PayPal?
PayPal is an online banking service. You can either have money in the PayPal account and preload it like a preloaded debit card, and you can buy things off the internet with safety. So if somebody rips you off, PayPal covers it. It's like having FDIC online. Or you can use your bank account or your credit card, and those purchases come right out of your bank account, which I made a mistake in telling my wife that. So.
Okay. What was your first investigative step with respect to Ms. Soul's PayPal account?
After seeing the activity on her iMac computer, I again issued that subpoena to PayPal, asking them for account history. I asked them for access going all the way back, of course, the period of investigation, October 21st through January 23rd, and they pretty much sent me everything that they had, their whole history that they still possessed.
Detective Clay, I'm going to show you two exhibits, State's Exhibit 60A, as well as I put the exhibit label on the back, 60B.
Okay. Get this thing out of the way here. Thank you.
What count? State's Exhibit 60A and B.
60A is the electronic data that was provided via email from PayPal. It's printed out form. It's a whole long list of different account numbers that Ms. Soul has had over time, some of her credit card information, again, not transactions, very specifically are IP addresses that were used to access her account from 11 December 2016 through 1st January 2017, and that's the first exhibit. The second one is for a demonstrative. It's their data put into a spreadsheet, and then I could actually show and correlate who those IPs belong to, whether they're Comcast, Frontier, Verizon, or whom they belong to,
Okay.
and dates and times.
And again, you weren't asking for transactional information.
No,
Like what was purchased?
no, that's for the case agent to do.
Okay. Okay. So, Your Honor, at this time, the state would move into that. It says Exhibit 60A and B.
No objection to 60A, 60B, I think is too much.
All right, 60A is admitted substantively, and 60B is demonstrative. Both admitted and may be published.
Excuse me.
So, State's Exhibit 60A is Ms. Soul's entire PayPal account history.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what you described. 60.
Okay. Thank you for shutting that for me too.
Try to figure out your body. And can you tell members of the jury what percent in State's Exhibit 60B?
What 60B is the four left-hand columns of the date and time, the IP, number, actor, and action. That's directly from the data provided by PayPal. The ownership is strictly what I put on there based on subpoena compliance and knowing who is what, knowing that anything 72255 is not only Comcast, but via subpoena, I know that that is or was Marcia Soul's Comcast Xfinity IP address at her home at the time. So I could go through and see date and times of when these were accessed, and we're dealing also with the fact that they are out in California. It's in Pacific Standard Time, which has been an issue with this investigation. We can see, based on the date and time, the very first entry is an administrative entry that had nothing to do with user activity. That's on 7th November 2016, whereas anything with an IP address is user-driven.
Okay. And using that, going to the last column of ownership,
Yes.
that would also, where there's that box is blank, that would be administrative from the company.
Either administrative or within the login. As I'll see specifically, one of the best examples is there's a web log on 11 December 2016, sorry, my eyes still wonky, from Comcast IP for Ms. Soul's account. We have a web login. They did their authorization, they're still pending. For whatever risk decline, it got kicked out. But these ones with the zeros, those are like, you could say, sub-activity of the actual activity of these. These are all Comcast, at least in this presentation of this.
Okay. So on the 11th of December, there was an access to PayPal from Ms. Soul's residence.
Correct.
Okay.
That could not be done remotely. That would be that you had to actually have use of her router, whether that's physically or it would be in the case wirelessly, but it matched up with the use on the computer as well.
Okay. Okay. And the same thing on the 13th, there's accesses.
Yes, there is 13 December, there's accesses or attempted accesses, risk decline, web login, flow presented, whatever was going on there, whatever user was doing that, they were attempting to web log in.
Okay. And again, this is from Ms. Soul's residence, these accesses where there's an actual IP address associated.
Yes, so far everything on this page we see at this juncture is all showing it's her Comcast IP address.
And so it's someone from her house accessing PayPal.
Correct.
Okay. In your investigation, were you able to discover other times that Ms. Soul's PayPal account was accessed via IP addresses associated with the defendant?
Yes, there were, mostly through the 19th of December 2016. There were accesses from the defendant's IPs or IPs associated with the defendant. Was there something on the bottom of the first page as presented? What ladies and gentlemen, jury can see is starting here part of 13th December, after there's access via Comcast or attempted access, customer information updated, someone's doing something with a non-email login ad. I'd have to get with them to specifically see what those are, but that's part of that whole login procedure. Pins failed. These are earlier. It's Comcast. Someone's trying to get in, and then we see Verizon Wireless. Those 174.228s. Verizon owns that whole block of IP addresses, and via subpoena, those are IP addresses specifically associated with the defendant's cell phone.
Okay, and I'll go back to that, was a credit card added to the PayPal?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell members of the jury about that?
I'm looking for it here. I'm trying to see if it's on here. Or it's on another part of the page. Wasn't that more later? Guess I'm missing it. Customer information added, web logins, then it finally locked itself. That's the defendant's home router right there. That's his Frontier Wireless. I believe it may be on the next page, but I'm missing it.
Okay, but so on those entries from the 19th of December, those are IP addresses. The attempted entries are into the PayPal account.
Yes, into Ms. Soul's account. They're logged obviously in their server. That IP address that's specifically associated with the defendant's phone, not another family member's phone, but his actual device. And then this is the home router up in Bradenton, the Frontier router.
But he couldn't access it via the cell phone or a IP address associated.
Based on my interpretation, this data is the person was not able to access the account at least by 8:19 in the morning Pacific Standard Time, which is, do the math backwards.
Okay, but earlier it was access from the Soul's, earlier meaning like December 11th, 13th, there was access from the Soul's
Correct.
house.
From her house, yes.
Now, showing the back page.
This is what you were asking about, the credit card ads. So we'll go back to the top where it continues. It's showing there's, as the jury can see, web password lock, these other attempts here. And this is from Frank Bybee's home internet. And then that's at 8:30 in the morning. 9:20 in the morning, someone at the Soul home using her Comcast Xfinity is actually updating customer information, whatever sanction list status means, I don't know. We go through the 19th here in time, and finally we edit 9:20 in the morning also. A credit card is added, user verification profile changed. I would assume based on my own training experience, knowing with this case and with PayPal, is that you could have added it and it verified it via your email, your phone, whatever your third-party authentication is, and then for whatever reason there was attempted access between the sole home, and then a few hours later, this is for normal people, 8:38 p.m. from the Bybee home, and then we have new 174s, which are actually ended up being Comcast as well, but that was all obtained via subpoena. So then there's somebody back and forth, so at the Bybee house, and then again back at the sole home.
Okay, so let's go back to the top of the page on that exhibit.
Okay.
On the 19th in the morning at 8:23, up until 8:30 in the morning, there was attempted accesses from the Bybee modem.
Correct.
Okay, and all of those attempted accesses were unsuccessful.
As far as I could see, correct, they're unsuccessful.
Okay, then at 9:20, that same day, but a little 50 minutes later, there's an actual access of the PayPal account from the sole residence.
Yes. It even states login successful.
Detective, through your analysis of records, can a company like PayPal distinguish from a different device even if you have the same login information? Meaning they can determine if it's your attempted access of records comes from a phone or a home computer.
Yes.
Do they?
And I know what you're asking is I know based on just this sophistication, but my use of PayPal, not just personally, but I'm the treasurer of my motorcycle club and I use PayPal, is it's called a foreign device. If I try and log in with an unrecognized device into PayPal, it will actually prompt me for information, and it basically thinks it's a hacker from Bulgaria or whatever. You're trying to hack in, you're in a foreign device, an unrecognized thing, and it will ask you to verify your information, whether it's verified via the email, and you'd have to have access to the email or whatever it might be in this case, but that's what can cause the login failures.
Okay, so these transactional companies have what's called a trusted device. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and a trusted device is a device that the company recognizes, besides just the modem.
Your
it's got
computer itself.
The device itself, a specific computer.
Correct.
And if the company is getting information from that non-trusted device, does it prevent then failure to get into that account?
PayPal does that, yes.
Okay.
They should do that.
Okay. And in your opinion, is that what these failures are?
They could be. I can only interpret the data in front of me, but I do know that there were attempts made that did not occur from IP addresses associated with Frontier Wireless, the defendant's home router, and then at the defendant's home, and then back at, the victim's home, Marshall Soul, and then at the defendant's home.
So is there an additional layer of security that the company has to prevent someone from accessing an account, even if they have the user ID and password?
Yes, and they have to, as a fiduciary, they're responsible for your money. If you get your bank account or your credit card in there, they need to make sure that it's not a hacker from Bulgaria getting in your account. And that's the reason for that, yes. And they do, in fact, do what we're discussing, this specific scenario.
Okay, and going back to the 19th of December, a credit card then was added from the sole residence to the PayPal account?
Yes.
And detective, you're just determining where the access was and not who accessed it.
Correct. I can't attribute it to a person, just where.
we're going to have some other documents come in through other witnesses, but does the sheriff's office have a GPS associated with their patrol cars?
Yes.
Okay. Can you determine the location of the defendant on the 13th of the defendant from a review of GPS records?
Yes, I actually, besides looking at the records that other detectives obtained, I personally went to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office Public Safety Communications Office and met with another witness who I believe is going to testify later and reviewed the data myself on their system for what Mr. Jackman is asking. On the afternoon of December 13th is that the defendant's patrol car was checked out on the victim Marcia Soul Street. The way our GPSs work, they're not GPS so much as in like you think there's a Garmin GPS. They're geolocated via your air card in your patrol vehicle, or you could do the same thing with your cell phone. But again, that's how it is. It's tracked. They only track the patrol cars when they're either in pursuit or out checked out on a call. So if you're just driving around willy-nilly looking around, it's not. So again, it did record it because of the fact that, yes, he did check out on her street.
Okay, on the 13th of December. And is that when, going back to the records on the 13th, that the account login, password change, and customer information was updated into the records in PayPal?
Yes.
Okay. Detective Klay, we're now finished with Ms. Soul's devices. Now I'm going to transition to a different area.
Okay.
I'm going to specifically ask you about the wings system.
Okay.
Detective, what other kinds of electronic evidence did you examine in this case?
There were well over 100 electronic devices in this case that I examined. One of the ones specifically, besides the defendant's sheriff's office phone, was his sheriff's office issued Panasonic Toughbook. That's the laptop that is issued to patrol officers for their boat, the car, helo, whatever. It's the patrol laptop.
Okay. Okay.
And this one that we're about to talk about was seized from the defendant's patrol vehicle at our fleet office during the investigation.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 61A and B. What are State's Exhibits 61A and B?
These two exhibits are what were printed out by me during the forensic examination of the forensic copy of Frank Bybee's sheriff's office laptop. So we make the forensic copy, and we go through the data. As I found that there was access to the sheriff's office wings program, which I'll explain in a minute, and then I'll explain how these occur and why these are here. But that's specifically what these are.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the State would move into evidence State's Exhibit 61A and B.
No objection.
Objection 61A and B are admitted. May be published at your discretion.
Can you tell the members of the jury what the wing system is?
Wing system is the sheriff's office report system. You can look up anything on there from traffic tickets to crash reports to interviews of people we just walk up to on the street to actual reports. It's pretty much anything and everything that's the sheriff's office, including now even animal services. Anybody that does any report, it goes in there. When I started, 94 was old. It's been around for a while, but it's obviously it works quite well. But this is the standard report system that every sworn officer has access to.
Okay. Is it searchable information?
It's very searchable. I can search by name, by phone number. I could search by look for white males between 20 and 30 on a certain street, whatever. It's quite versatile.
Is this information publicly accessible through public information?
Not generally. You can do a public records request and get some of this information, but because it has personal identifiable information, PII, like social security numbers, where you were born, it's not generally accessible. The public can't come up and just look at this.
Okay.
If they did want to report, obviously we have to redact it, but generally this is very guarded information because you can see everything about a person, even the vehicle they drive if we pull them over.
Now, I'm going to put on to States Exhibit 61A. What is 61A?
What 61A is, the way the wing system works is if you picture like your internet and you're browsing on the internet. Like, people may not know this. When I go to a web page, I go to Wikipedia, I'm accessing their server, but I'm not looking at it on their server. I am downloading that entire web page, pictures and all, onto my local computer. Wings works the same way. If I go and type in and search Marcia Soul, I actually download this web accessible. This is literally how the program Wings reads it. It loads it in here, caches it, so to speak. Not so to speak, that is the technical term. So it loads it in there, and then there's hot buttons, things that are underlined you can click on and actually then see everyone that lives at 3296 Brockton that's ever had a report. But that's how this works. It loads it in there. The top headers, those are not put in there by me. This is literally exactly how it was on the defendant's sheriff's office computer. So it shows when the inquiry was done, and then the 2.7 is when I printed it.
Okay, so this you took off the defendant's Panasonic Tough Book?
Yes.
And what does that mean with respect to Miss Soul that the defendant did?
This is her main persons page that at the time on December 21 at 6:09 in the morning local time, that any reports listing Marcia Soul were in sheriff's office records.
Okay. So he actually had to word search Miss Soul to get all her records, involvements with the sheriff's office.
Yes, this was specifically done. It would be via her name, and then you click into it, and then it actually loads this data on your computer to then look at it, and then you can click on the actual report numbers.
And for instance, where it's underlined, you have a report number, it would be a hyperlink where you press that and the report would come up from that incident.
Yes.
So on the 21st, the defendant accessed every involvement that Ms. Soul had with the sheriff's office.
Yes, I believe if you go through the reports that are listed there as of December 21, that those are then cached on there, those individual reports, including the crash I worked with her back in 2014.
Right, and I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, when I did my 5 years back in traffic while I worked with the crash, she was involved in with one of our deputies.
Okay, all right. So, and that's why you have to report an officer on that. So
that's who actually wrote the report, not who was dispatched it. Whoever got stuck actually having to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard actually wrote a report. And you can see the very first person is Frankie Bybee, and then myself, and then Mike Day way back in 2008. So there wasn't a lot of reports on her.
okay, and this is the actual second date of that Williams access on 61A.
Correct, actually. It spills down to 1997, 1999. There's some traffic stuff there where she got written up.
So every time you're involved with the sheriff's office, they're tracking that in some type of computer database.
Yes, sir.
Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 61B. What's State's Exhibit 61B?
This also, the only thing that's my data is the date. It was printed on 2/7/17. It actually makes you do that. I had no choice. Anyhow, this is the same person's page now from January 9th, 2017 at 3:29 p.m. local time for normal people instead of reading 15:29 hours. And these are all of Marcia Soul's reports she's listed on, now to include a December 29th case that Deputy Stephen Collison wrote.
Okay. So there's a subsequent access by the defendant in Ms. Soul's sheriff's office records, and that's on the 9th of January?
Yes, again, displaying all of her personal identifying information, socials, everything that's pertinent to a person.
Now, are you able to determine if the defendant actually did more with the records on the 9th of January?
Yes, the individual reports were cached on the system, and that way when you do click on it, well, of course, there's the stuff back in time and some traffic tickets. But then we get to
those are
the
same 2 pages.
correct. And then this is an actual report. This is where Deputy Collison on 29th December 2016 responded to Marcia Soul's home address at 3296 Brockton Lane. So again, you have the hyperlinks. You're actually going into the report.
Again,
That's what we have.
Collison.
December 29th of 2016.
Okay. So then the defendant is accessing the sheriff's office records on that Baker Act case.
About the Baker Act, and he's doing this on January 9th.
So he has all the information that the reporting deputy put into the system.
Yes, now with certain things, certain cases, certain situations, there could be protected information that would never go in there, like a domestic battery. There's forms we fill out. With this kind of case, there's certain paperwork that wouldn't be loaded. But generally, whatever's put in there, a lot of that data is from a dispatcher.
Okay.
They're putting that stuff in there. They're actually telling us. It doesn't mean that's what the deputy wrote. There's going to be a separate report, but this is basically, that's all. If I can use the pointer, would probably be great to say that's all. This is all the stuff that dispatch puts in. But the actual report would be in there, or you could then access that in other means.
Okay. So after Deputy Collison's name on the left, there's information REC, apostrophe D, and can you read to the member of the jury what that is and the significance of it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you tell me where
Right after, and I'll put Deputy Collison, his name,
Oh, yeah.
underneath there, I'm going to say there's jargon, SSO jargon.
Oh, receives a suicide threat, 32 threat, suicide threat from patient, playing with doctor's office, received email at 1440 hours, station's going to 32, kill herself tonight, subject has a history of Baker Act, unknown means, 54 signal 0, not armed, meaning no weapons mentioned, unknown subject has weapons, and the Vox, I also worked part-time in dispatch for about 6 years, that means that the dispatcher actually voiced this out. They hit the foot pedal button and said any in the area. They felt that this was urgent and didn't like just assign it out. They actually voiced this call. And then they added stuff. Now this means as a dispatcher is taking this call and the radio person is working this, and then there's still information being added by the call taker in the back, and then the patient information is put on there, the vehicle information, pretty much anything they can get, and then this is for the complaining request to call back the results after a certain time. And this is the on-call doctor. And then this is stuff, the deputy's on scene. He's saying, I'm okay, don't check on me, ask for an ambulance, request 1071. And then it's stamped by Deputy Collison that he took a white female into protective custody at 511.
Okay. But there's a notation that the dispatch officer indicated that it was urgent based upon the email received in the doctor's office?
Depending on the certain circumstances of the call, they're required to voice this out, but they felt based on their training experience and protocols that they had to voice this out. This was urgent. They don't just voice anything. It gets really annoying when they're voicing a barking dog or an alarm call or something stupid.
Did the defendant give any other reports?
Yes, and these reports, as shown here on the Elmo, are only on the system and cached because they were accessed. And again, January 9th of 2016 or 2017, excuse me, was on the top, and it actually reports the information. This is the crash that I worked, and there's the information from dispatch, and then this is all the stuff I had to type in.
And again, this is the last.
Yes, this is a 2008 vehicle burglary, but it lists certain information about the victim, her vehicles. Same thing with my crash report. It would have her specific vehicle information.
So going to the top of State's Exhibit 61B,
Excuse me.
the defendant didn't access the case case that he was involved, but he accessed the ones, the top few cases that he was not involved.
Correct.
And that was on the 9th of January
Yes.
from his sheriff's office computer.
Yes.
What exhibit was the?
Okay, now we're going to go into a different subject area, Detective Klay.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the defendant's personal computer.
Okay.
And a cell phone backup from that computer. Okay?
Yes.
Detective Klay, were you able to forensically examine text messages between the defendant and Ms. Soul and Ms. Dombro and Ms. Philomena Pereira?
Ultimately, I was able to do so via a backup of the defendant's phone on his Apple laptop.
Okay, so you said you needed to go to his computer. Why did you need to go to the computer?
We had a number of phones that were seized from the defendant, from his person, from his vehicles. We did not have a functioning phone at the time from the defendant, or we thought was the defendant's phone. It literally did not work.
Okay. Was it inoperative?
Initially, what we believe was the defendant's phone based on the serial numbers and so forth, it was inoperative. It wouldn't power on, it wouldn't charge, it was dead.
Okay. Okay, and we'll discuss that later on. But did you search the defendant's laptop computer with a unique identifying device of D94F1349, and I'm just going to put ending in 06015E. That was obtained pursuant to a search warrant at the defendant's residence.
Yes, it's evidence item number 78, the sheriff's office calls it. It's a Apple MacBook Pro, and it was a fully encrypted and password protected locked device.
What did the forensic examination of that computer reveal?
Well, first, after I was able to break into it, so to speak, to dumb it down of how to get into this password-protected computer, I went through and tried to search for Marcia, word search Marcia. I tried to see if there were backups of devices.
Okay. Before you got there, were you able to determine the user profile?
Yes.
Okay, what was the user profile, if you recall?
Just like an iPhone, you have to have an Apple ID to use an Apple device, specifically MacBook Pro. I've got a couple of them myself. And in this one, it was the defendant's email address. It was fbybee1589@gmail.com.
What's the significance of that?
It's his name, and 1589 is his badge or ID number.
Okay.
And that's his known email address that was cross devices. That was what was listed in his Verizon Wireless account. So to attribute ownership, obviously see who the Apple ID is.
Okay, so what's the significance of an Apple ID?
It's not only unique to the person, but your Apple account has to be password protected. It doesn't mean your laptop or your device has to be, but generally it's something you would hold close to your vest. This is my account, this is my password, to install apps, to do anything. But again, we as an investigators, myself, use this means to attribute ownership or access to a device.
Does it permit cross-synchronization of data then between devices?
It can. Your Apple account can be used for what's called Apple handoff, where if I enable it, I could look at the same text messages, phone calls, emails on one Apple device as another. You literally switch off one or the other at the same time, but that's why it's set up that way with an Apple ID. It attributes ownership and use between devices.
And to who an authorized user is?
Correct.
Okay. Was the computer, the MacBook Pro that you examined, was it password protected?
Yes, it was, and those specific computers are actually fully encrypted by a file vault. So without a password, you're not getting in them.
Okay, was it encrypted as well?
And it's by default, and it was fully encrypted.
Did you utilize the blacklight program which you discussed initially in your testimony to examine the data?
So what I did is, after I was able to defeat the password, I found the password list of
Okay,
of
how did you
passwords.
find the password?
During the execution of a search warrant at the defendant's home, I was given access to photographs of a 3-page document, and it was all the defendants' accounts and passwords, and I made a password list to use it for cracking, and ultimately one of those passwords on the 3-page list did unlock the Apple MacBook Pro evidence item number 78.
So the computer was password protected.
Yes.
Had you not had the password, could you have got into that computer?
That one, no. No, they meaning Apple, have made it that there's no defeat anymore. There's all kinds of methodologies. I can get into older Macs, but the new Macs with Follow Vault, they don't want the cops in there. You're not getting in without a password.
Had you not been able to defeat the password by finding a document with a password, you couldn't have got into the data.
Correct, and it was like a 11-digit password. It was pretty unique.
Okay.
And then we get into the actual phone backups, which I know you're going to ask me about. So.
Okay. So do you recall what the password was to get in?
It was his boys' names. It was 1 Nick, 1 Sam, 1 Cole, 1.
Okay. And that's what you entered, and you were then able to get into the defendant's Mac.
Ultimately, that one worked, yes.
Okay. What's the significance? Well, did you find a number of recognized USB devices?
In any of my investigations, we attribute ownership and other devices we're looking for. Your operating system, whether it's Windows or Mac, actually has trust pairing certificates to know if I hook a phone up to it, it's a trusted phone. Because when you hook up your phone, it says, do you trust this device? And it recognizes that way you don't have to do it again. Or if I'm looking for child pornography, and I look at their computer and I'm looking for a USB, I know I'm looking for a certain USB. So that's what the first place we go to is you trusted USB devices and your phone hooks up via USB. So I went there to see what phones or what unique devices showed in as a recognized device in my computer.
And actually, I should step back one moment and say, what is a USB device?
Anything that can hook up via the USB ports. It doesn't necessarily have to be a flash drive. It could be, again, cell phones.
Okay, it could be a cell phone.
It could be a video camera that has a USB-enabled way of connecting to a computer, but I was specifically trying to find devices and dates that they were actually last synced or attached to that computer.
So does a connected user have a trust certificate permitting cross-synchronization of data?
Yes, that allows it that if it's a trusted device, you could do an Apple iTunes backup. You could put apps on the phone, whatever the user wants to do, but that way when you hook it back up 3 weeks later from the first time, it doesn't make you go on your phone and find your glasses and go, trust this computer, and whatever you need to do. It just automatically, and then it automatically will start iTunes. That's one of Apple's features.
What, detective, did you do with regard to the device backups on the defendant's Apple laptop computer?
Well, throughout the investigation, I've been looking for certain phones by their IMEI numbers. That's their International Mobile Equipment Identifier, which we'll get into, and by their serial numbers and by dates of usage. And throughout the investigation, one of the things I did is I actually served a search warrant on Apple to get all of the UDIDs from the defense devices. UDIDs are unique device IDs. So if I have an Apple iPhone and someone steals it and they hook it up to their computer, it's going to say, no, that UDID belongs to James Klay and you can't have it. You can never do anything with it. So they're very, again, I say unique. So those UDIDs. So when I'm going through the data on the defendant's laptop, I actually could see that there were Apple iTunes backups that were named after the UDIDs of his unique devices.
Okay, and you said devices, and they were identified by serial numbers and UDIDs?
Inside, once I actually cracked into them, it identified the specific devices, but there were 2 phones that I was dealing with. I call an old phone or new phone, which I'll explain, is the phone that I believe was utilized during the course of the investigation of October 21st to mid-January. The UDID started like 238, and then the other one had a high one. It was like 8910. But they were 2 very distinct ones. You can't change them. They're imprinted in the board, and again, it identifies it for many purposes.
Did the Apple records and the Verizon records match as the devices belonging to Frank Bybee?
Yes, they did.
Why is that important?
It attributes ownership and use. It attributes actually when a person had a phone. If I were to go get a new phone, obviously Verizon would show that I got that phone by serial number, IMEI, and you did. And then when I first log into my Apple iTunes account, because you have to have an Apple iTunes account, it's going to recognize that you did and say, this belongs to James Klay on this date. This is the first day we've ever seen this. And they can also tell you sales history, repair history, if it's a refurb, so I know the provenance of that phone or not.
Does it also permit a cross-synchronization of data between the cell phone and then the computer?
Yeah, because it's a unique you did, if I put it in my phone, say I messed my phone up and I delete stuff I don't want to delete. Well, if I backed it up, I can hook my phone up and I can recover it. Or if I get a new phone, I don't have to put in my 2098 contacts all over again. I can hook up the old phone, dump it, put the new phone in, and use iTunes and transfer my contacts over.
Okay, so does that mean that the data on the defendant's phone can then be located on the defendant's computer?
To a degree, yes. There's certain things that Apple absolutely will not let you back up in an iTunes backup.
Okay, and we'll discuss some of those, but were the device backups encrypted?
They were fully encrypted, and they actually used the same password. I was able to crack them open with a one Nick, one Sam, one Cole, one.
Okay, so the fact that you were unable to get into the defendant's cell phone doesn't mean you weren't able to access information from the account from the device backup on his computer.
Correct. They were, both phones, as I call the old and the new, were backed up on his Apple laptop.
So what did you then do to obtain the cell phone data information off the computer?
Off the computer. After I was able to crack open the fully encrypted backups, I used Cellbrite Physical Analyzer and I used Magnet IEF to validate it, actually go through the data. That way I can see, what phone calls are made, what text message iChats are made, email headers. Email is specifically not allowed by Apple to be backed up. I can get basically the headers to from, but then validate the data. And within the actual backup, because it's identifying itself, so you can restore your device, it actually has your serial number, your phone number, your name, your contacts, all that stuff's in your Apple backup.
But you couldn't get email information?
No, I can again get to from, but it's called sandboxing. Apple does not want anyone to get email. That's why it's encrypted end to end. And if I do an Apple backup, it won't put email on there. And certain apps.
Okay. Were you able to recover text, phone logs, and photos that were on the phones at the date and time that it was backed up to the computer?
Yes, and that was, it was actually mounted, as we call it, backed up, hooked up to the computer between January 15th and 16th. There was actually a couple times, but mainly it was, I could say, a switch over from the old phone to the new phone on January 16th, 2017.
Okay, and just to remind the jurors, you couldn't obtain any data off Ms. Soul's phone after December 22nd because it then became locked.
It was locked, yes.
What user data did you find to associate the user to be the defendant in this case?
Well, besides the fact that it had his Apple ID of Bybee 1589, the phone was actually named John Doe, but it was his phone number. It was 941-238-8564. It's his known phone number he's had through time. This is, as I'll call it, the old phone, the original phone. It had the IMEI and the other phone numbers that the company uses and the serial number to identify it, that was the phone the defendant had for roughly, I think, about 3 years. But it was definitely that phone we were looking for. That backup was it.
I'm going to show you Stacy Exhibit 62A through D. Ask if you recognize them.
Okay. Yes, I do.
And what are they?
The first two, 62A and 62B, they're actually printouts directly from the Blacklight computer forensic program. The very first one describes about the computer, that the username is Frank Bybee, about what it is, the Mac OS X. The second one talks about the actual device backups is parsed by it showing the serial numbers for the phones, the date and times they were backed up. The UDID, it says hash ID in here, but that's the UDID. So it shows those two devices were backed up on January 16, 2017, right at the same time at 16:21 hours. I'm sorry, 21:37 hours. Looking at the wrong thing there. And 62C Charlie, this is actually a screenshot from a Celebrate Physical Analyzer after I did crack open one of those iTunes backups, showing what the phone data was about the phone, the Apple ID, the phone number, the UDID to correlate it back to it. And then the last and fourth thing, 62D David, this is directly from the Apple data that I obtained via search warrant I served on Apple out in California that actually shows what the serial numbers and UDIDs are to back it up. Subscriber information to show this phone belongs to Frank Bybee with his address and phone number and the serial number and the UDID. It ties it back in to say that if you're looking at this data, this backup, you are looking at the data from this certain phone, and it's a phone that the defendant had since December 20th of 2013. And then the new phone, as I call it, was purchased January 15th of 2017. And again, they were both synced on the 16th.
Okay, so from the records, you were able to determine the defendant purchased a new phone on January 15th?
Correct. I believe from the records, it's not in here. It was actually FedExed to his home.
Your Honor, this time states the movement of evidence states that 62A through E.
Okay.
No objection having been heard. 62A, B, C, and D are removed and may be published at your discretion.
Essentially, this is mostly identifying data to the defense phone and that is back up to the computer.
That's all that really says is that was it.
Detective, do you now have access to communications to devices associated with Ms. Marsha Soul and the defendant to January 15th of 2017?
Yes, from the iTunes backup, I now have at least the iChats on the defendant's side of the phone, including those with Marsha Soul.
Is Ms. Soul listed in the device contacts?
Yes, she's listed by her name and her known Sprint phone number. I know it starts 544, like 6590 or something like that. But she's listed in there. And when we look at the actual conversation thread there, I think there's, 435 messages over time?
And we'll get to that.
The defendant, his phone number is listed, but he has himself in his contacts as Superdad Frank Bybee. So I know who's who. It's Superdad Frank Bybee and then the other party, Marsha Soul.
Detective, I'm going to hand you what is one of the states is 63.
Okay.
You recognize that document?
Yes, this is an extraction report from actually made by Physical Analyzer, Celebrate Physical Analyzer. And this is an intact, maybe I was thinking of another one I spat out, 435. This is an entire conversation thread of 673 iChats, and it's between Superdad Frank Bybee and Marsha Soul, and it starts off on 28th October 2016, and this chat ends on December 20th, 2016. So it's one whole long conversation from October to December.
Your Honor, this time it says that the movement of evidence states that it was 63.
No objection.
No objection. 63 is admitted, may be published.
So this is all the iChats between the Soul and the defendant that's recovered off his computer, which synced up his iPhone.
Yes.
Detective, I'm going to hand you what's on all the states exhibit 63B.
Okay.
What is states exhibit 63B?
This is the same thing. It's an extraction report. This data is contained in that giant document, but this is just 37 messages on December 10th of 2016 between Marsha Soul and Frank Bybee. Just focusing on December 10th. Between their two devices, and without really getting into it, it's got the phone number and address. It's really hard to fake that I mean, it's coming from the phone number associated with it, from your contacts.
It's coming from a device. You're not saying the authorship of anything, but it's coming from a device to another device.
Correct.
So 63B is just the iChats between those two devices on the 10th of December.
Yes.
And I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 63C. What is State's Exhibit 63C?
.63C is from Frank Bybee's laptop, the backup of his phone. It is a group of 14 messages on 10th December 2016 from 10:32 on that do not appear on Marcia Soul's phone. They're missing in that gap from 10:32 in the morning until the next day on the 11th.
You had indicated on Ms. Soul's phone earlier when we discussed the extraction of data, there was data from December 10th that was missing.
Yes, there was definitely a message sent. There was no actual typing in it. There was no data information, but something had been sent. And
you can't determine what was sent or received?
No.
Okay. On Ms. Soul's phone?
No, but I can now from the defendant's phone.
Okay. So are these the differences in the iChats between what you recovered off of Ms. Soul's iPhone when you did the forensic analysis on December 22nd, or recovered data to December 22nd,
right,
versus the data recovered off the defendant's?
Correct. Yeah, this is from the defendant's phone, encompassing all whatever took place on 10 December.
Okay. And again, this was not recovered off Ms. Soul's iPhone?
No. Again, the conversation stops and picks up the next day on the 11th. This goes all the way from 10:32 in the morning to 10:43 in the morning.
Okay.
So only about 10 minutes, but it's 14 messages back and forth.
Okay. Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would move it out of state to 63C.
No objection.
Objection having been heard, 63C is admitted.
I'm going to put it up and probably ask you to read it because it may be small, just the differences in the two devices that you were able to discover.
Okay.
Showing State's Exhibit 63C. This is, again, what?
This starts off, this is from Frank Bybee's phone. This starts off at 10:32 a.m. and these are text messages that do not appear on her phone at all. At all.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'm going to have you read those 14 text messages.
Okay.
Can you read from there, or do you want me to hand it to you?
I'm doing good right now. I just had eye surgery, so that's why I keep mentioning about not being able to see. So, okay, I talk fast. The very first one, it starts off, Frank, I do not need your help. You cannot refuse my money. And
What device is this coming from?
What I'll say is, if it's over on the left-hand column, it's going to be from Marcia Soul's device. If it's on the right-hand column, you see on the bottom of where would be a picture, if you had the person's picture, that's the responding person. It even says it's from Superdad Frank Bybee. So these are all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a blank one. 7 on the top are all from Marcia Soul's device, or at least showing her phone number and name and contacts.
Okay.
So that's what these are from 10:32 on. Frank, I need your help. You cannot refuse my money. And
just stop for the court reporter when you're changing blocks so she knows when you're indicating a different.
Surely. And the next block is blank. There's no data sent. That's also within the same time. The third block at 10:33 and 34 seconds. I'm changing my beneficiary to you. You can take my Wells Fargo accounts and live a good life with headaches. And then we switch to the next box at 10:35 and 13 seconds. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but I'm used to having people care for me like you do. You are from heaven. Please do not refuse my money. I have so much I want to give to you. Moving to the next block at 10:36 a.m. and 35 seconds. You can take my credit cards, checks that I signed for you, my debit card, and use them. my life easier. I'm sorry, make life easier for your family. I can't take it with me and have never been cared for like your gamble has cared for me. Reading it verbatim there. The next block is at 10:38 a.m. and 4 seconds. My ATM card number is 2210. We see that pin again. I have 80,000 in there for you to do whatever, and to pay yourself an election for sheriff. You're a good man, and you would do so much with my money, much more than I can ever do. Make a change in the community. Be the best sheriff we've ever seen. The next block is 10:38, 19 seconds. Now give me your social security number so I can give that to my accountant. And then we move on to a message that shows it's from Superdad Frank Bybee with his phone number, 10:38, 42 seconds. You're silly. If you want to make a donation in my name, that's fine. The next message from Superdad Frank Bybee at 10:39, 22 seconds. My social security number is, and it gives a social security number. We already went over all that. If you want to give a little bit to the boys, that's fine. But I don't want to take your money, and I highly doubt you have $80,000 in your savings account. And if you do, it will take that much. It will take that much in your new home. Sorry, reading verbatim. 10:40 and 38 seconds now from Marcia Souls. I want to get the boys something nice for Christmas. Use my eBay or Amazon account. I could buy them something with my credit card, please. I'm not concerned about the price. You have no idea what I did my whole life. I don't have family or anyone. Everybody just works for me. You mean the world to me, Frank. And again, from Marcia at 10:41, 14 seconds. From her device. You're truly like the son I never had. I contacted my accountant, and they're sending me new beneficiary forms. I'm going to tell them that you're going to be the sole beneficiary of my investment account. Excuse me. At 10:42 and 17 seconds, also showing from Marcia Souls' device. They might call you. I'm going to give them your phone number. Please do not refuse this or argue with me. You were a very stubborn man. Your wife and boys are lucky to have you, but please do not refuse my help. I can make life so much easier for you and your family, something you pass down to your boys. Maybe build the auto shop you told me about. I'm moving down to the next block at 10:43 and 5 seconds. The maximum amount you can take at my ATM is $400 a day. Take as many days you need. No limit for you, Frank. The checks are there also that I signed. They're all written out to you, and you can fill in the amount. These are my final days, and I really don't want my money going to the government. Moving down the last box at 10:43 and 33 seconds from Superdad Frank Bybee. You have your friend call me, and I will talk to her or him, but please just get some rest today.
And this thread of the conversation was removed from Ms. Souls' iPhone.
Correct. Not one iota that was on her phone.
We spoke about the earlier text on that day from the device of Ms. Soul. At 9 a.m. that day, what was the context of the communication between the
And referring back to it in my head, I remember that it was general run-of-the-mill stuff, but at one point at 9 a.m., it was something to just of, Frank, you can't run my life or stay out of my life. But it wasn't as pleasant. It was,
Okay.
I'm having my day and stay out of my life, and then we take this tack.
Okay. Does the difference in the text messages mean that the texted conversation never existed on Ms. Soul's phone?
No, I think it existed on her phone.
Okay. So what happened to it?
I believe it was deleted.
Can you tell me when that data was deleted?
I can't tell you when it was deleted without having access to it. It's all, you can't make up a negative, so to speak. But I can tell you that it had to have been deleted by the 11th because the way the databases work is first in, last out. It's going to start overwriting, and it's going to build that database back to the 11th. So somewhere between the 10th and the 11th, it had to have been deleted.
So it was almost immediately deleted?
In a very short period of time. Whatever that time difference is between 10:32 a.m. and then the next morning when conversation ensues again on the 11th.
Detective, what other information did you find of investigative importance with respect to the cell phone backup?
I went through finitely, based on the investigation, looking for certain pieces of data. When the phone was used, when the phone was not used, certain triggers, looking for emails. I obviously looked for anything having to do with Marcia. Based on the alleged offense on the night of the 11th to the 12th, obviously I was looking for phone calls, text messages, emails. When the phone was turned on or off, there's certain things that happen in the background of the phone when you turn it on, at least, maybe not turn it off, but looking for certain data.
Okay, did you look for browser searches and deleted browser searches?
Yes, all the web browser, the Apple Safari, the entire internet history had been deleted. However, because it was not used again after it was deleted, that whole first in, last out principle, none of it was overwritten. So, I mean, it was all there, was all recovered.
Okay, so the browser history, the searches were deleted.
They were user deleted by someone or marked to be used deleted, and again, because it hadn't been used, they were all still there.
And we're talking about the defendant's iPhone.
Correct.
I'm going to show you States Exhibit 64A and B
Okay.
and ask if you recognize 64 States Exhibit 64A and B.
Yes, I do.
What are States Exhibit 64A and B?
They are graphic representations of data from the defendant's phone, actually literally copied out from the database in the case of 64B, and then we have the internet history parsed out in a graphic representation. And these are all in local time, but the very first one are Safari internet browser searches, and the second one is the Apple iPhone recents log, which I know we'll talk about that, about what the recents log is. I know we did earlier, but again, real quickly, that it tracks you. Sorry, I know I get off on my tangents.
Your Honor, this time says
No objection.
No objection having been heard. 64A and B are admitted and may be published.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what's in States Exhibit 64A?
These are the searches that were performed on the defendant's phone, and they are verbatim as how they were entered in, which she's got, whoever did this has pretty good spelling. They got everything looks like kind of right. But they were all, everything was marked and deleted, the entirety of all the internet searches, and there were quite a large number. It had been a well-used phone for 3 years. It was all deleted, but these are all of the most recent ones, including duplicates. You can see that somebody's researching, going back, searching, going back. Maybe they don't like what's on the page. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So, again, these were all deleted internet searches off the defendant's phone.
Yes.
And how did you then recover these deleted searches?
Well, luckily they're in a spreadsheet type database, and they're in normal, regular, translatable English. That's how the phone works, because when you pull your browser back up, if I start to type in does my, it's going to remember and use the database and go, oh, does my, do you want to finish it this way? That it's for ease of use for the customer user. So it literally translates it so we can see what this device was used for to search for. At least this representation is December 6th, 2016 through January 15th.
Okay, we're going to go through each of those browser searches. But did the defendant have to specifically delete those searches for it not to be on the phone?
Yes, specifically on this Apple phone without iOS and the way it works, you would have to go. There's some steps to go through to delete your browser history. It's very overt. It doesn't do it on its own.
Okay. Overt meaning
Someone had to take a specific action
to delete it.
Correct.
Okay. Let's go with the first deleted browser search in States Exhibit 64A. Date wise from the December 6th deleted browser search.
Starting from the bottom.
Detective, let me just
Yes,
interrupt
sir.
you for a second, please. This looks like an ideal time to take our lunch break before we start parsing this out. So why don't we do that at this point? Ladies and gentlemen, let's take our lunch break. Thank you for for hanging with us for the very short break this morning. Hour and 15 minutes, is that sufficient for all of you to get a good bite to eat? Come back? All right, 1:15, we'll see you all here.
All rise, jurors leave it.